great privilege to be here, and on behalf of all of us who are a part of the Distinguished Visitors Forum, we would like to thank very much the University Competitiveness Forum for allowing us to come in and see some of the issues that the Korean university sector is facing, some of the challenges that you have, the very creative ways in which you're addressing them. We've been here for several days at the invitation of the Korea Foundation, which has been a terrific opportunity for us to better understand that the nation is dealing with. And so thank you again for having us here today. It's our great privilege, and we very much appreciate it. So I want to take a few minutes because I was intrigued by some of the earlier speakers talking about the deeper challenges facing universities. I find that the title of the organization, the University Competitiveness Network, a little bit ironic because we want to be competitive, but it's our own competition that in many ways is hurting us, and so we're addressing this. I've been asked to speak a little bit about my own university, about Oklahoma State, but I would like to frame it within this context of the challenges that all of the universities are facing. I'll give a little bit of an overview of my university, but then I want to finish with just a few comments about the challenges that U.S. institutions are facing towards internationalization. We've seen many newspaper articles. The Chronicle of Higher Education has talked about what we call the crisis of international education in the United States. And so we are also facing our real challenges. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But let me frame it within the context of the experience of my own university. You might know, as we mentioned earlier, there are actually 3 OSUs in the United States. Ohio State, Oklahoma State, Oregon State. Ohio State claims to be the OSU, and the rest of us get annoyed. But I do represent, he showed me how to work this, and there we go. Did I go too far? Okay, so Oklahoma State is it's a land-grant university within the state of Oklahoma. We have about 25,000 students. We're Carnegie R1, Tier 1 university research. RWU and Times Higher Ed and the 500 to 600 range. I'll talk a little bit about this because Oklahoma State's experience, like many U.S. universities, has been that we have ignored the global rankings for many years, and it's killing us because we've ignored them. And so a number of American universities, but I would say still a small number, less than 10%, actually are paying attention to the global rankings and taking steps to address them. And it's made us very non-competitive. It's really hurt our competitiveness in the global marketplace. We are like many universities our size. We have a comprehensive programs and so on. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. This is Oklahoma. We're just above Texas. It's a state of about 4 million people. And in that state of 4 million people, we have over 28 state-supported universities, which is, again, one of our problems. We have too many universities for a small population of 4 million people. In addition to the 28 state-supported universities, we have another dozen or so private universities. And one of the tensions we have within our own state is deep competition between those universities for state resources and for students. One of the ways that Oklahoma State addresses this is 1/3 of our students actually do not come from Oklahoma. They come from Texas. They come from Dallas-Fort Worth area because there, again, competition drives them out of the state. We live in a college town of about 54,000 people. Now, this makes another challenge for us in that around the world, the best universities are located where? In cities, except in the United States, where all the land-grant universities are typically based in small towns. And so that's another factor that makes it difficult for us to compete. I've mentioned the word land-grant, and many of you probably have experience with land-grants in the U.S. They are a unique American institution that were founded out of U.S. federal government actions of 1862, in which the federal government would give grants, usually of land, sometimes of money, to each of the states if the state would form a university that had 2 key purposes. Number 1, focus primarily on economic development, by which they meant technological advances in agriculture and engineering. So most of the land grants began with the name A&M. I used to work at Texas A&M. My own university used to be called Oklahoma A&M. Iowa State used to be Iowa A&M, but many of them changed their names. The second key factor was that the universities could not focus on elite students. They had to focus on the children of the farmers, the poor, less advantaged citizens of the society. And so the land grants became a major factor. The other characteristic, of course, is you see this picture here. The land grant universities all have extensive systems of what they call extension. And so in my own state, our university has an office, an extension office in every county in the state, all 77 counties, where they provide technical expertise to the farmers, the ranchers, the businesses. And so every land grant school has this extension mission, which means, again, our resources don't go just on the education or the research. The resources go on the economic empowerment of that region. The land grant system probably was one of the biggest factors in the expansion of the American economy in the post-war period, because it took the scientific research out of the laboratories and out of the elite universities and pushed it to the communities, and particularly the rural areas. My own university was founded in 1890. That's actually 13 years before the state was founded. So the university is older than the state of Oklahoma. About OSU, we have about 1,500 international students, over 60 from South Korea. We have 240 international faculty. And I would like to mention just this other element. One of the aspects of being a land-grant university is, particularly in Oklahoma, almost 10% of our students are Native American. And this has become a major part of our university life. So Native Americans historically have come from less advantaged economic or social backgrounds. Our university has made a major effort to integrate them in, to bring them up to the highest educational levels, and to build out the economic growth of the Native Americans as well. Just last fall, we announced a new partnership with the Cherokee Nation. So the Oklahoma State Medical School is partnering with the Cherokee Nation to form the first medical school located in tribal land, located, really owned by the Cherokee Nation. And so it's been a tremendous benefit as we announce that. Now Native Americans from all over the United States have asked to come be a part of that effort. But the idea is, because Native Americans typically are health deserts, very poor healthcare facilities. And so by forming a medical school for the Native Americans, we hope to address that issue. Our global legacy really began in 1949. We had a president, Henry G. Bennett, who was a personal friend of Harry Truman. And of course, South Koreans know Truman very well. But Bennett was asked by Truman to be the founding director of something called the Point 4 program. The Point 4 program is the scientific counterpart to the Marshall Plan. You might know the Marshall Plan was the U.S. initiative to provide political and economic aid to post-war Europe. The Point 4 program was a scientific counterpart to focus scientific and technical knowledge on developing nations and thereby bring about economic development. And so Henry Bennett, right here, was tasked with building out that agency. But because he was the president of Oklahoma A&M University, so he committed Oklahoma State. He invited a number of other land-grant universities, including Michigan State and others across the nation, to participate. Our own involvement with that was building out this new university in Ethiopia. Ethiopia had no agricultural university, so over 300 Oklahoma State faculty and staff spent some time in Ethiopia building out what's now Haramaya University. And that continued on in the 60s and 70s, and we continue to work in those kinds of areas. We are very proud, of course, of our most famous Korean alumni, Nam Deok-gu, if I said that right. So he graduated in 1961 from Oklahoma State with a degree in economics, later became the finance minister of Korea, and later for 2 years served as the prime minister. We honored him in 2005 with one of our highest university awards, and we're very proud of that. And we see his success and his contribution to the growth of Korea as part of our land grant mission. We're very, very proud of that relationship. We also have a very robust relationship with the oldest universities that does fire protection, safety management kinds of programs. And so since 2005, we've been training Korean firefighters who come to our campus and spend time learning how to do more advanced firefighting capacity. And then in September, we'll start another one with Gyeonggi-do Provincial Fire Academy to continue that relationship as well. I'm going to skip this, but I just want to focus on our research aspects. I very much like what our friend from Sao Paulo talked about, the importance of those international research collaborations. The problems that our world faces are no longer local, they're no longer national, they are in for the universities to engage in that type of global collaboration. And this is one of the challenges I'd like to talk about is we often define internationalization of universities as primarily or even solely about student mobility. And we have to grow beyond that thinking. And so I very much commend the thinking of the leadership at University of Sao Paulo to take that to the next step. Our own emphasis tends to be in unmanned systems, in One Health, the integration of human health, plant health, and animal health. As a university with a veterinary school, we see that all of those health issues are related. Food safety, for example, is absolutely critical, and that can't be addressed without the insights of animal science and so on and so forth, as well as the medical school. And then we focus a lot of research on this food, energy, water nexus. In addition to being a land-grant university, we've also been designated by the U.S. federal government as a sun-grant university. And the sun-grant universities have a special mandate to focus on sustainability, and particularly in the area of energy. I'm going to skip all of these, and then unfortunately, I changed my slides up at the last minute, and the last slide didn't get in there. So if you'll indulge me just a minute, I'd like to talk just about the 4 challenges facing American higher education institutions related to internationalization. Number 1, declining enrollments. Now, this is a problem that our Korean colleagues feel much more acutely than us. We understand the demographic trends are not working in your favor. In the same way, international student enrollments in the U.S. have fallen dramatically. 3 months ago, the federal government issued a report that showed international enrollments had been declining for 2 years. The problem with international student enrollment in the United States has fallen consistently for 4 years. Now it's fallen probably 15 to 20% what it was. Where that's being felt the most is in the middle of the country. The California institutions, the East Coast institutions aren't really struggling as much, but it's the middle of the country institutions that are struggling. I like to point out to my friends from Asia that actually there's great education outside of the East Coast and the West Coast. As a matter of fact, much of the intellectual firepower of the United States resides in places like Purdue University or University of Texas at Austin. So those middle of the country universities have great research capacity that's often underappreciated. The second challenge, of course, is the problem of competition. In the United States, we, for many decades, have assumed that everyone wanted to come to the United States and study. But of course, in the meantime, a number of other English-speaking nations as well as non-English-speaking nations have really upped their game. They have greatly improved their outreach. The rise of Australian universities, Canadian universities. We see almost a direct inverse relationship between declining enrollment in Canadian universities. Part of that is because they're doing a much, much better job of recruiting. They're much more sophisticated in their recruiting. And of course, one of the issues we have in the United States is we're heavily, heavily decentralized. Universities do not work well together. At a land-grant university, the very definition of a land-grant university is nobody knows what anybody else is doing. And so even at our own university, we have no integrated international recruitment policy. Related to this is the issue of reputation. In the last 15 years, you're aware the Times Higher Ed, the QS rankings have become tremendously important. And U.S. institutions have ignored this. As a matter of fact, almost every U.S. institution, you go and say, where are you in the rankings? And they say, with pride. And so that kind of thinking that the rankings have no substance behind them really hinders American universities' ability to improve. I've been following the rankings debate quite some time, and one of the things I've been struck with is in many Asian universities, not just Korea, university leadership see the rankings as indicators of areas where we can improve. They're not just a beauty contest. They are actually seen as strategic indicators. That perspective has not really penetrated the United States very well, and that's come to haunt us. At my own institution, I've taken on this task of addressing what I think is an insufficient ranking for a Office of Institutional Research, and found out that they were actually submitting wrong data. Not lying, they just didn't understand what question was being asked. Let me give you one example. We probably have over 300 faculty who are not U.S. citizens. They're permanent residents and so on and so forth. Then we have another probably 100, 200 who are naturalized U.S. citizens. But when we got the survey from QS and said, how many faculty of international origin do you have? We told them 32, right? So we undercounted by a factor of at least 10. Now, was that intentional? No, it was because we didn't really understand what was being asked. And we have constant struggles on how do you answer these questions in a way that is accurate, but that also doesn't undermine the university's reputation. Finally, the last challenge to internationalization in the United States, I think, is especially right now in relation to China, is heavy government suspicion of international research collaboration. Relationships with China, of course, are terrible. In Houston last week, 3 faculty researchers from MD Anderson Cancer Center, one of the best cancer centers in the world, were, who knows what, they were accused of sharing secret data with Chinese institutions. Whether they did that, I don't know. But that kind of story is becoming very, very prominent in the U.S. and raising tremendous governmental suspicion of international collaboration. The National Defense Authorization Act last year, originally the original language would withhold all federal funding from any university that had too deep of ties with China. And so this suspicion of international research collaboration is one of the things that I think is a significant challenge for the U.S. I want to just conclude with one thing. I think the thing that's really important for us to consider, I mentioned at the start of my talk that there's a strong suspicion in the U.S. that international education has reached its peak and is now in decline, that international education is now in crisis mode. I think that is only true if you have a very narrow conception of what international education is. If the only thing you think it is student mobility, then in the United States we have peaked and we're in a downward decline. If, however, we look at all that globalization and international collaboration can be for a university in terms of scientific collaboration, in terms of developing shared approach, not in crisis. Thank you very much for inviting us, and thank you.